Thanks, everybody. We're going to get right into it right away. Steve and I are going to be here for the next 30 minutes, and I couldn't be happier to be with all of you today. I am a people person, and I love seeing all of you here. I've worked with some of you for like decades, and have been on projects with you for decades. In fact, Judy and I were at Michael and Leslie's house for Michael O'Donnell's 30th birthday party, okay? And that was decades ago, okay? And I have managed teams here, and so I am up here today really representing kind of everybody who went through the pandemic. I had an experience as a leader and in sales that I had to handle how does my job change? How do I mentor people? How do I work? I realized through the pandemic that I get an enormous amount of joy and energy personally from being with people, and that was taken away. I assumed that was just a natural part of my career, and I lost it. So as we go through this presentation today, please ask questions. Please think about your own personal experiences. I will not be answering those questions. Steve will be answering those questions right up here. But I'm going to get through some quick data slides, and then we'll be able to get to Steve's presentation. There's three big things here. Everyone realizes that the workforce and the work we do is changing significantly, right? This is not just a result of COVID or a result of any other factors. There's multiple things that go into this change of demographics. We all have seen data slides like this. There are 50 other data slides like this. There are Harvard Business Review slides like this. But the interesting thing is that not only are the demographics changing, it's the engagement and how people are engaging with technology that is changing. Look at this slide. This is what happens in an internet minute, 60 seconds. So if you go back to the demographics, and that's just about people like all of us, what's happening with engagement and technology, you then get to add one more pillar or one more, twist, and that is economically what happened to all of us during COVID, right? And all of us have seen some slide like this. What industries have been more impacted, when we're going to come back fully from the pandemic. But this is what our all shared experience has been over the past 18, 19 months. So if you go through those three big pillars, right, of the people, right, the technology, and how this pandemic has actually impacted all of us, the question isn't how it's impacted us or how we get the data, right, or what the data is. The key here is, what do we do? I know what I did. I have no idea if what I did was right? The good news for us today is the person who can answer that question about what do we do is sitting next to me, okay? So the reason that Steve has a great opinion about what to do is that Steve has actually presented to hundreds of thousands of people and talked to thousands of organizations about the what to do, right? So I'm real excited. Think about questions on how you did things, what you could have done better, what you can do going forward. And Steve, I'm excited to sit up here and listen to the rest of your presentation.
All right, I'm not feeling pressure at all. I have the answers for all the things about what to do. No, thank you, Jim. I would start with a little bit of background about myself so you know where my perspective is coming from. So my training, my PhD is in a field called industrial organizational psychology, which is not clinical. It's basically the psychology of work. And I have this great title at SAP. I am the Chief Expert of Work and Technology for the SAP Innovation Office. And to kind of give you what I'm going to be sharing where it comes from, I kind of like joke, I'll just give you my own career background. As I like to say, I wasn't always a chief expert. I was once a junior expert. But no, what I started out my career in is very early on, got into the field of psychology, but I also, my undergrad degree was in applied mathematics, so I had a really good understanding of technology. And I focused my career on understanding the intersection of technology, psychology, and business performance. Both how do we use technology to create more effective work environments, but also how is technology changing the work environments that we need to create. Now, for a person that does what I do, the last 2 years have been a pretty darn fascinating time. And it's really forcing us to rethink the nature of what work should be, not just given COVID, but given what technology enables us to do, combined with what we need to do because of the way technology and demographics are changing the world of work. And to give you the sort of background of this, I'm going to use sort of an analogy of surfing. I went to UC San Diego. Go ahead, go Tritons, woo! Yeah. They wouldn't probably accept me if I had to apply now. It's a much more competitive school than when I went. But I used to surf. I was a terrible surfer, but I used to surf. And the thing about surfing is I think it gives a good analogy for the nature of when we look at 2020. Surfing is an interesting sport if you've ever done it, because basically you're paddling out into waves that are constantly changing. Every wave is different, they're bigger, they're smaller, and if you can figure out how to ride them, it is really cool. If you can't figure out how to ride them, it's kind of terrifying because you can drown. So it's a really interesting, I think it has a good analogy for kind of the nature of what companies are going through. In Q1 of last year, it wasn't like we weren't going through a lot of change. There was a lot of stuff going on, but we kind of felt like we were figuring it out. And then Q2, everything was turned upside down. But then in Q3, we kind of like came out and started paddling back out, and we're like, okay, we're figuring this out. Q4, everyone was talking about, oh, we're going to get back to normal. But as I remember in February, a friend of mine said, February of 2021, a friend of mine said, it feels like December 97th of 2020. Mm-hmm. You know, we didn't go back to any normal. We're not going to go. And actually, it's the wrong way to think about it. Like one of our customers said, we don't want to go back to normal. We want to go forward to better. And what we're in a world is we're surfing bigger waves that are changing constantly, and it's not going to slow down. The two biggest changes, and as you alluded to, that are affecting every company, one is digitalization of everything, which is accelerating the rate of change across companies overall. Whatever your company is doing now, it's the wrong thing to be doing 2 years from now. Something's going to require you to change and rethink the nature of your work. And the other big one is the shifting demographics, which mainly are caused by the fact we are having a lot fewer children. I mean, a lot fewer. If you go back 100 years in the United States, I don't remember the exact number, but women had on average about 6 kids, and now they have like 1.7. We are, for the first time in history, in a lot of our labor markets, having more people leave than entering the labor market, particularly if you control for immigration. This has never happened before, and it's requiring us, we have a more diverse labor market, and we have to tap that more diverse labor market, not just because of the social good of inclusiveness, but also because of the business imperative of it. What we're seeing right now, women leaving the workforce because the challenges is not just a social equity thing, it's also an economic crisis. And so really having to rethink this. So what did we learn from 2020? What it taught us is actually stuff us psychologists already knew. Which is people actually are really good at change. We're really good at it. It's called learning. It's the competitive niche of humans as a species, is our ability to adapt to changing environments. We're really good at it. Sadly, other animals are not. And so when we went to remote work, all these people thought the wheels would fall off, but actually engagement levels went up. And if you think about that, imagine if you'd gone into the CEO of your company in February of 2020 and said, you know, I think we should move our entire professional workforce to 100% remote work in 2 weeks. How they would have reacted. That's insane, that's impossible, but that's exactly what companies did around the world. And people actually were more engaged because companies were listening, they understood the reason for it. I'm not saying it was easy, but on average engagement went up. What we also saw though is that the experience was not the same for everyone at all. Huge diversity, largely based on how you were managed. If you had a good manager that set clear goals, you felt supported and listened to, you actually felt more connected to the company, more of a sense of belonging. If you didn't have a good manager who didn't regularly check in with you, you felt worse. And so for 60% of employees, belongingness went up. 40% of employees, it went down, as well as all the things that affected like your life situation. So he said, we can't think in terms of averages anymore, because what one person is experiencing does not tell you what another person is experiencing, or even that same person at that point in time. And as the year wore on, we're into this, we're seeing it exhausting people, particular managers. There's a phrase in healthcare called caring for the caregiver. Managers are the front line. They are the human face of an organization to an employee. A company cannot care for an employee. Only a person can care for an employee. And the person who has a lot of that bulk is the middle manager. I'm not saying that's the only person, there's teams and everything like that. But suddenly managers are like, I've had several managers say, I've had people cry on phone calls. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I was not trained for this. The role of manager has become more critical, but it's also become more expanded. So managers are really struggling as well. So what this really comes down to, and what I'm going to go through, is that we need to rethink what it is to manage a workforce. For a new world where the waves of change are coming constantly, and the really big changes, we need to challenge our assumptions from historically focusing on productivity and cost efficiency to adaptability and change orientation. Because psychologically, if you're managing for productivity, we're most productive when we're doing stuff we already know how to do. How you manage for adaptability is very, very different. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and the role that technology is playing in this. And it's a really big mind shift, though. You're not hiring people for what they know, you're hiring people for what they're learning, you're managing people based on helping them learn and adapt to change, and it's a different way of thinking about the world. And I want to make a little brief point, too. The only constant resource you have for dealing with change in your company, and the best resource, is the people in your company. I don't know what your company will look like in 10 years, but it will employ people in some way, shape, or form. Even if they're managing robots, it's still going to have people. And I want to, right here, dispel a myth. This is like getting on my pet peeve. I hate all the generational stuff because it's a formula for ageism. This like millennials are like this and boomers are like that and Gen Z are like that because we survey monkeyed 200 people last week. First of all, the stuff that drives changes in people what they want, yeah, career stage, huge impact. Early career, you want more feedback. Later career, different focus. You know what? It turns out when you have children, it shifts your life priorities. Whoa, that purpose-driven job versus paying the rent, it switches. When you control for all of the things that influence attitude and what you want, the economics, the labor market, and all of that, generations, the year you were born doesn't matter. What's going on in the year of your life right now does. And so I just want to say, and there's research, the good research that goes back to actually looking at people, what they want from work, going back to the World War I generation in 1918. What they found is what people fundamentally want from work hasn't changed. A sense of challenge, recognition, a sense of stability. What changes a lot based on the labor market is our belief that we can actually get it. And that is what changed a lot now, because skilled talent, because of the shortage, has a lot more options than they did before. But every time you hear somebody say millennials this or millennials that, replace the word with like women or minorities and listen to what it sounds like. It's not good. Don't do it. All right, I'm off my little soapbox. So we need to learn surf. We need to learn to surf bigger waves. What are the bigger waves we need to learn to surf? Well, there's if we had, it's a whole nother session, but there's talent shortages, there's inclusion and diversity, there's this move to hybrid work, there's changing skill requirements. There's an interesting factoid. I think it's like 5 of the fastest growing jobs in the United States right now didn't even exist 10 years ago. You can't hire for them. There's no people out there. You're not going to find candidates. You're going to have to create the people to do these jobs. Well-being and resilience has become really critical because we're under so much pressure, and people cannot be really service-oriented and collaborative if they're stressed. I'm going to do a really quick little exercise. I want everyone to smile, and those of you that have masks on, I'm going to try to see. I want you all just to smile like a picture. It feels fake, right? Yeah? Because it is fake. You cannot authentically smile if you don't actually feel good. It's called emotional labor. It's exhausting to do. And so if we want employees to be creative and collaborative, we have to create environments where they feel good, not stressed out. And then, of course, there's the whole security privacy thing, too. As we go more digital, security is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. And what's the single biggest factor that impacts security risk? Come on, cybersecurity people, it's
People.
people, yeah. So how do we create that environment? So all of these things are going on. So how are we going to do it? It requires us to really rethink work and really rethink how we use technology. And I'm going to ask you, anyone know the historical significance of this building? Anyone know what this building is?
I do. You told me.
Oh, that's true. What is it? What building is it?
Well, Steve, this is the first administrative office building that was from the Royal Navy, which was the first purpose-driven building to gather people together.
That is amazing.
I did
I
listen.
mentioned it briefly, and your mind is like a steel trap.
It's because I was interested in you as a person.
Well, thank
right?
you. The point is that this is, in fact, the British Admiral building, and it is arguably the very first office building that they needed technology, and you nailed it.
Nailed it.
They needed technology as all the other office buildings had before been palaces or factories. This is the first one just built so people can commute and meet. We can thank commutes to this building. It was created so that as the British Navy got bigger, people could come together and communicate in this very large organization, taking into account the communication technology available in the 18th century. If we had always had Zoom, we never would have had 9 to 5 commute every day to work cultures like we had, that we were living. Like every day we get like lemmings into our car and drive to work just to sit together. And why did we do it? Because so much of what we do about work, we don't do because it's effective, we do it because it's familiar. And it's familiar because its work practice is based on technology constraints from often the distant past. We need to really think about what makes sense for work and leverage technology so that we can manage in a much different way, which means technology both enables and constrains our thinking about what's possible. And so really challenging ourselves to rethink work. I would be remiss not to mention something about remote work, but I want to start though, the big point here is technology changes what's possible to do, but it does not change what is actually done. And this is an article I wrote that really gets into this. The single biggest barrier for change in an organization is leaders, not employees. Leaders willing to push the envelope on what's different. It's not employees. Employees, if it makes sense to them, we saw it with remote work, they'll do it. But it's leaders' willingness to push the envelope. And just a little bit about hybrid work, because I've talked to zillions of companies. And by the way, remote work is new to a lot of people. It's not new. It's been around for a long time. Lots of research on it. Well, we know, first of all, it's a cultural value. How important is it that people actually sit in the same office as you? You know, why? It's actually not. If you need to see people to know if they're doing a good job, you are a lousy manager, unless you're managing ballet dancers. It blends online and in person. This is important. Remote work, what we're even experiencing is not remote work, it's physical isolation. Part of remote work is coming together, absolutely like this meeting, but coming together for a very intentional purpose. It emphasizes flexibility. It's not about do people want to go back to the office. What everyone wants is the ability to decide what makes sense for them in terms of their home office environment, the length of their commute, all these other things. It's called freedom. People like it. Giving people flexibility to decide what makes sense for them. It enables much more inclusive job design, particularly for people who have primary family care responsibilities, which in our society is women far more than men. If women were where we should have been, a long time ago, 50% of our leaders should be female. We got a ways to go on that. We would have had remote work a long time ago because they understand the value of that flexibility if you're the person who's got to go pick the kids up if they get sick at school. It changes that. And it requires effective talent management to do it well. As I said earlier, If employees feel a sense of good, clear goals, good feedback, they know the company evaluates them, they understand their role, we like remote work, we like the flexibility. If we don't, we're kind of paranoid about it because we don't know if we're doing a good job and we're very, very anxious. And so, but on the whole, it's where the world's going. It just makes sense. So I want to cover two more things. One, and then
we'll get to the question.
And then we'll get to the question.
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting the questions. So in terms of remote work, the last thing I want to talk about is I said that we need to switch this idea of managing for adaptability. Somebody asked me once, how do you train somebody to be adaptable? And it's the wrong question. We're born adaptable. When kids are born, all they know how to do is learn, eat, and poop. And if you've ever had kids, they're really good at all three. Mm-hmm. You don't teach kids, oh, it's time for you to learn how to walk. Go to a seminar on walking. They just learn. It's innate to us. And as a parent, what you need to do is create the environment where learning is enabled. The three big things that influence learning in terms of the experience of work is, first of all, task experience. Do we have the confidence that we can get the resources we need to get the job done? If you've ever yelled at your computer or phone, that's a bad task experience. It's a sense of frustration. And that's where things like, one of the things, a good example, a lot of stuff with the vaccination, having cloud technology where you're able to very quickly build things so people can just do work. Like we've got Qualtrics and Alert Enterprise as two partners created like things for COVID screening like immediately because we suddenly needed this stuff. And so making it really easy to do it. The second is social experience. Do we feel connected to other people? So how can we use technology to bring people together? And like if you're taking a learning class, who else is taking that learning class with you? So you create a sense of community and fulfillment experience, which is, are we making sure that the job is providing what people want, both in terms of are they paid fairly, do they feel they're fully appreciated, and their career advancement and the reason that they work, which is talent management. If you have these three things, people can deal with amazing levels of change. But if anyone drops below a certain level for a certain amount of time, we go from change as learning to change as survival. And so looking at how you can use technologies like mobile technologies to give better task experiences, sort of online social learning communities, through better talent management and compensation technologies, and really pushing on how are we creating this experience, not about process, the experience we're creating, and underpinning all of it, listening to people the entire time. But we've got to push ourselves in having used that technology. So with that, I'm going to close up. We're going to have questions. But basically, we can either be tossed by the waves of change or we can learn to ride them. I say, let's learn to ride. Surfing is fun once you figure out how to do it.
Great. So thank you very much. All right. So I know that there were some online participants. I don't know if there's any questions or if we get them from ASA. It looks like there's not. And then we do have microphones walking around. If there are any questions, please raise your hand in the audience. But Steve, I'm going to ask the first question.
Yeah.
All right. So we've hung out for a little bit. Do you have any advice for Jim McArdle?
In a public forum?
In a public forum. Bring it on. I get thick skin.
No, you were talking about how you've done a lot of mentoring of people starting out in sales roles, and that focus of how does that change in this more online environment. And I think the really thing that's really important is we have to make sure that we connect with people in a authentic way, which is, there's a concept in psychology called supportive managerial behavior, and what it talks about is when you're under a lot of stress, if your manager is a person you can relate to as another human, not as like just a role figure model, then we're more comfortable saying, I'm struggling with kids issues or work issues, whatever it is. And so as a leader, the more vulnerable you can be, and we've seen this in Zoom. I mean, one of the things that's been really interesting is it used to be execs acted as though they had no family outside of life. Yeah. And then in Zoom, it humanized us because you had kids and pets walking in, and
pictures in the background of your Zoom profile on the bookcase.
I joked it was like there's the People magazine celebrities, they're just like us, right? It's like executives, they're just like us.
Right.
They yell at their teenagers. But when you have that vulnerability, that authenticity, it makes people much more comfortable connecting. And then the other one I'd say is, to your point, in-person meetings are important, but do it for a reason.
Right.
I think.
Yep, that's great. Okay. Oh, we have a question.
Hi guys, good morning.
Hi.
Hi.
Quick question
Hi, Rashana.
for you. Hey, hi. Jim and I golf together on Sundays. So in an industry like the utility industry, where typically we have lagged behind and being forward thinking around our people processes, and whether that's women in leadership or diversity in leadership, everything that you said today completely makes sense. What's the one thing that us as leaders, practitioners can do when we go home to start pushing forward and really helping our organization ride those waves?
Yeah. I mean, of course, it's going to be different every
Well,
company.
first thing you should do is you should schedule an executive leadership session with Steve Hunt at
That's
all of
true.
your utilities. So
If
he'll come out
anyone
and talk
wants
to you.
to talk to me, I love to talk about this stuff. I don't know if it shows, but if you have a CE or AE or an SAP customer and say, can I talk to Steve? Reach out. Maybe after this you'd be like, I never want to hear from him again. But the point that I say, I would go back and I would say, talking to your employees and say, what is it that we're doing that just doesn't feel right, that doesn't make sense, and can we do it differently? And then look and explore technology to do it differently. I'll give you a really good example, scheduling. One of the biggest headaches in a lot of jobs, and utilities, in some utilities jobs, certainly a lot of industries, is scheduling and flexibility of scheduling, to the point that employees will quit, they'll leave, there's all sorts of reasons. There's technology now that allows employees to have much more control over their schedules, where they can, it's called job sculpting, they can do the work in the way that makes sense for them. But we used to not be able to do that because you couldn't do it with Excel spreadsheets, but there's modern technology, so that's a good example. But I'm just going back to the employees and say, what is it about work that you find restricting or constraining, or what is it you'd like to do more of but you don't get to do enough of? And then really challenge to say, is there a way for us to do this differently? And I would say, how you're doing it now is not how you need to do it. And I will tell you, any talent management process designed more than 3 years ago that relies on technology is outdated. The technology is advancing so fast. That doesn't mean you have to change it, but you would design it differently now, because it's just like your phone, this stuff moves so fast.
Great.
So.
All right, thank you for the question. So we're at time right now. Steve is going to be around for the rest of the conference, and we will be able to talk through this multiple times, multiple sessions, but I just wanted to say thank you very much for everybody, and let's learn to surf. Is that the way
learning
here?
to surf. Let's go. Let's head
learn
out to
learn the way surf.
Coronado.
So thank you very much, everybody.